In today's video, we're going to make this potpourri pot. Here's another shot that I came up with. You can composite however you like, but this is what we're making today. So let's go ahead and get started. First order of business as usual, I'll go here and clear my scene. And what I want to do is I want to bring in a mesh primitive. In this case, it's going to be a circle because most of this shape is going to be cylindrical. I'm going to have 32 verts. I'm going to create the radius at 6 inches because I'm using US units. Going to go to edit mode, vert select. And I want to do is I want to start on the bottom and start working from that way. Now let's grab these verts here on the bottom. And what I want to do is I want to just scale them in a little bit. I'm trying to create a particular shape. This is the very bottom of the potpourri pot that we're building right now. I'm going to go a little slower on this video than normal. So you're going to see some of the steps in here that I normally cut out in other videos because I think you guys have seen those steps like a million times if you've watched some of my older videos. But in this one, I'm going to show a little bit more stuff. So this one's going to be a little bit slower pace. What I want to do is extrude and scale this in because I'm closing in the bottom faces here. And then I'm going to put a grid fill in here just to tie it off so we have an all quads solution in our topology. And I'm just lining it up. You don't have to, but it just looks a little cleaner. And right now, remember, this is all flat. This is all flat geometry. Well, it's not really even geometry. It's just flat faces. So we don't have any depth to it yet. So I'm going to grab this edge right here. And I want to put a bevel on it because when we render this and run sub D on it, I want it to have a nice rounded shape. And what I'm doing here is I'm controlling the look of that bevel or the look of that rounded edge. That's the whole purpose of me doing this. So I'm going to grab these 4 faces here and hit Command plus or Control plus, depending on what operating system you're on. And I'm going to scale that selection in a little bit. And then I'm going to move it up because this is in line with the shape of the base of the actual potpourri pot I'm looking at. Unfortunately, I don't have reference images. I'm physically looking at one on my desk and I'm building it. And you'll know what it looks like when I'm done because it'll look just like what I'm looking at. All right. So for right now, I am putting some edge creases there. I may change it to actual bevels later, but for right now, it's fine because it's non-destructive. And now I'm going to go to my modifier stack and I want to bring in a solidify modifier because I want to give this actual geometry. So it's not just flat faces. I want to scale down my thickness. And I want to apply it. Now that becomes actual geometry. And just like that, we've got this part of it for the most part done. But I want to do some tidy up work. So I'm going to edit select mode. I'm going to grab these edges here at the top of this rim. And I want to put a tight little bevel on them. So when we run sub D on this, it'll look nice. And remember, these bevels restrict how much and where sub D has an effect. I'm going to change my profile shape to 1, and that forces it to be more of a straight edge or a hard edge. Just when you want to do rounded edges, don't forget to go back and change that to 0.5 or something in between. This is where you can control the smoothness of the bevel. That's what that profile shape does. All right, so now I'm going to go in my outliner and I want to start giving stuff a name. I'm just coming up with something literally off the top of my head here, and I want to put it in its own collection because all of the parts of the model are going to be under one collection. It's just typically what I do. And I'm going to give it a color so I can very easily see it in the outliner. Just kind of looking it over, make sure everything looks okay. And now let's go in here and select this. I'm going to hit Shift D to make a duplication and separate that out as a selection, because from that selection, we're going to build the next part of this, which will be the wall, the side walls of the potpourri pot. And since I already have the shape, I can go ahead and name it in the outliner so we know what it is. And as you see, it's in the same collection as the base plate portion. So one thing I want to make sure we don't forget to do that's kind of important is this thing has like little feet on it, like little pedestals for feet, so that the hot bottom of the potpourri pot is not sitting flat on the surface. So let's go ahead and bring in another circle mesh primitive. I don't need it 6 inches, so I'm just going to arbitrarily pick something because I did not measure the diameter of the feet. I usually use a pair of calipers to do this on most smaller things. I did measure the potpourri pot itself for 6 inches, but we're just going to eyeball the feet. I'm not making this for a client, so if you are, you're better off to measure it, just FYI. So I'm going to make a cylinder out of a circle. I'm tapering that bottom end inward a little bit because this is how it's shaped. And notice, yet again, we have flat faces. We don't have geometry on this yet. So I'm going to extrude and scale, and then I'm going to grid fill this just to tie it off at the top and close it off. The grid fill allows us to, instead of like hitting F to fill it in, make it an N-gon, the grid fill gives us all quads. It just ties all the verts together. And I had even forgotten when I was recording this that this is still flat. So I'm sitting there trying to bevel that flat edge and it's not working right. So let's select all. Let's hit Shift N to recalculate normals just in case, so we don't have reverse normals. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a solidify to this as well. And then I'm going to lower the thickness because it's way too thick. And that looks about right. Let me take a look, and as you can see, the top of that foot is eaten up into that geometry. So all I got to do is just move it down and restrict it on the Z-axis so it's not wobbling all over the place. I could have also gone in there and hit the snapping feature and snapped it to the surface or the face of the bottom of that base station too. That's another way of doing it. That would have been more accurate, but at least for me, it was just quicker to do it the way I did it. So now I'm just duplicating it. I'm hitting Alt D instead of Shift D. Alt D makes an actual literal linked duplicate of the thing that you selected from. Shift D just makes a copy of it. So you can look at it like a copy that can have its own attributes versus a linked version, whereas if you change one or any of them, they all inherit the same changes in real time. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to parent the feet to the base. And that was, I hit the wrong button there. Give me a second. Okay, now we got it done. So now the feet are parented to the base plate. Now the base plate here, I got to run, I'm doing a level 2 sub D. I don't need to do anything higher on this model. This model's pretty simple. And then I'm going to do shade smoothing. Do the same thing to the feet. And we are done with the bottom part of the potpourri pot minus like little minor tweaks. I'm just going to move that down a little bit more so you don't see that eating up into that geo. All right. So now we're back to the walls. I'm going to go to edit mode. I'm going to select those verts. And what I need to do is, because it takes up the same space as the base plate, I need to scale it in some and move it down some because I want it to start down inside of the base plate. I'm using X-ray mode so I can see where I'm going. Then I'm going to extrude everything up. I'm going to select everything, Shift N for recalculating normals. And like I said, that's just to be safe. That way I don't have to stop and check it. Only time I stop and check it usually is if I have an issue. So I want to grab this lower section of verts down here, which would normally, if you were in edit mode and then hitting 2 on the keyboard, that's usually edge select mode. I'm just doing it with the verts. I'm doing literally the same thing though, just FYI. Now I'm going to extrude and scale, and as you can see, I'm eating into the part of the base where we extruded it upward. So I'm just going to grab all of these verts right here and just push everything up, moving the G tool on the x-axis. I just want to get it up above that part that we moved up from that base. And see, now that when we scale this in, it's not eating into the geometry. And yet again, I'm going to grid fill it to finish it off. Now, we still have flat faces, but I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put a nice little rounded bevel here, which you're not even going to see this. But, you know, just for the sake of good modeling, I want to go ahead and have a nice little bevel here. I don't want a straight edge because you'll never see a perfectly straight edge anywhere in nature. Even a razor blade has a bevel edge on it. It's very, very small, but there is one. All right, so we're going to do solidify. Solidify is going to give us basically thickness or depth to this, which is going to give us actual geometry once we apply it. And once we apply it, we're committing this to the geometry. So let's do that. So go back to edit mode, and it's a lot of tall faces there. So I'm going to put some loop cuts in here to kind of break it up a little bit. It's going to give us more topology. And I want to do the same number of loop cuts on the inside in case we have to drill a hole in it or something crazy later on, which we won't, but I'm just saying, I'm just showing you guys this in terms of just modeling how to think about that sort of thing. Let's go up here in edge select mode and let's grab those edges at the top of the wall of the potpourri pot. Just give me a second here. I've got my clip start set kind of low. All right, let's put a tight little bevel there. And if you notice, my profile is still set to 1, which is going to guarantee like a nice tight edge right there. In other words, when we run sub D on this, it's going to retain its shape. All right, so we got sub D on it, shade smooth, and so far it's looking good, and it's matching with the base that we created before. So now let's go in here in the outliner, because I just made another selection. I'm basically repeating the same pattern, and this is going to be the bowl. This is going to be the ceramic bowl that fits inside of the potpourri pot that actually contains the potpourri and gets warm from the heating element and gives off the scent. I'm not modeling the heating element because let's just pretend it's hidden under between the base plate and the wall somewhere, and we just don't need to see it. So I'm going to scale this in a little bit. I'm going to grid fill that. And what we're looking at here is the bottom of our bowl. And if you look at the sides of the insides of those walls, you see that weird looking stuff going on? That's Blender's way of visually showing you that more than one object is taking up the same Z index or the same space in time, if you will. I guess that's the best way of saying it. And it's usually something that, you notice and you can either fix, or maybe you intend for it to be that way. But when you render this, you'll literally have two different objects, possibly with two different materials, literally taking up the same space, and you just may get weirdness. So that's a visual indicator in the viewport to show you that one or more objects is taking up the same space and time. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Same story here. I'm adding loop cuts because I want to give it more geometry. I put the same amount of loop cuts on the outside. And I want to bevel down here just like before, because this is the part, if you take the lid off, you'll actually see the inside of this. If that makes sense, because this is going to be sitting inside of the walls. This is a whole nother pot that sits in there. All right. So now I'm going to grab this edge up here. I'm going to go to front ortho, X-ray, because I'm going to bring this up, and this is going to lip over the sides, which are going to be the handles in which you pick the pot up from. And actually, the particular potpourri pot I had, the bowl was fixed to the rest of it. Like, you couldn't lift it. Like, it's not like a crock pot where you lift this part out. And essentially, a potpourri pot and a crock pot's the same principle. Principally, it's the same design. It's the same thing, just two different use cases. In a crock pot, you can lift that bowl out, right, to clean it or put your meat or vegetables or whatever in there. With this potpourri pot I had, it was fixed. So I'm just building it like that. I'm gonna use these two sides here. I flatten them out. I'm gonna grab each one and I'm gonna size them out on the X-axis. And these are gonna be your handles. And like I said, we run sub D on it. It's gonna be nice and pretty. Let's select everything. Let's recalculate normals. And the only thing I need to do in here, guys, is add a solidify to give it some geometry. So let's go ahead and do that. We turn sub D back on first. And now let's go do a solidify modifier. And let's change the offset. And bam, we are in business. Now you see it's sitting a little high, so I'm just going to nudge it down a little bit back inside the walls. And I'm going to do a shade smooth. And it looks a little muddy on the inner rim and around that outer edge, but that's super easy to fix. So let's go ahead and apply this geometry so we can manipulate those edges. So I'm going to disable sub D so I can see the edges really clear. So I'm going to grab that edge. And I want to put a nice little bevel on it. I don't want to get too small because I don't want it to look super sharp. I want it to be defined, but not super sharp. So I give it a little bit bigger bevel, if that makes sense. Now I need to also grab the outside edge that looks a little too rounded and do something similar, but like a different bevel. And really, guys, I'm literally eyeballing this. I know what the thing looks like, and I'm mimicking my size of bevel to the look that I think I want it to have, right? And if I screw it up, I can hit, Command and Control Z back out and try it again. Yeah, see that? Nice little bevel, but not crazy. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let's disable sub D again. And notice I've explained this before in other videos, but a lot of times you'll see me back and forth disabling sub D because I need to see the edges to select them or manipulate them or whatever. All right. So now let's go back in here and let's create a shape for the lid. We're now building the last part of this thing, the lid. I'm not worrying about the power cord because that's a curve and some boxes essentially. That's easy. I'm not going to bore you guys with that. So we're going to do the same technique as we've done throughout making this pretty much this whole thing. Is I grabbed an edge off of the previous model because I know it's the same diameter and it's in the same position. And from here, I start sculpting it to look like the thing I want it to look like. In this particular case, that's going to be the lid of the pot. And I'm going to show you what it looks like if the lid doesn't come out looking quite like you want. Instead of deleting it and starting all over, I'm going to show you in this video how to manipulate the geometry you have to get the shape that you want. So just stay tuned. You're going to see that here in a second. So let's go ahead and just close off part of this. This right here, I'm modeling the top of the lid. I'm in X-ray, so I know it's kind of hard to tell where I am. This is the top of the lid. There's a little hole at the top, and there's like a little cross, two pieces of plastic up there. And essentially, reason why that hole is there, because when that potpourri heats up from the heating element, and then it heats up that entire ceramic bowl, the potpourri starts giving off its aroma. It'd be like sticking, I don't know, some kind of scented liquid in a thing. You heat it up, and then you smell it in the room. Like I don't know. I mean, just basic science, I guess. But I mean, essentially, that's how this thing works. Sorry, I'm trying to hit the shift key and I keep hitting the caps lock for some reason on my keyboard. There we go. So what I want to do now is I want to start with a selection. And then from here, I can hit Control plus, Command plus. And the way I deal with this, because that bowl's not shaped like that, as I just select the faces that I want to manipulate. You watch, you'll see me do this here again. Let me make this hole a little smaller first because it's way too big. So I'm just going to scale it down and see I got long faces there. So let me put another loop cut there, kind of equalize that. That makes our geometry relaxed, which makes everything look a lot nicer. You don't get a lot of tearing and weirdness and that sort of thing. So see, this lid still doesn't look right. So what I want to do is I want to grab some faces here. Well, first let me pull this up, because this piece here is supposed to be pulled up. Go to X-ray mode so I can see it. Let me extrude this up, and then let me taper this in or scale it in a little bit. Kind of like same type of principle we did with the feet, but just not as extreme. And what I want to do is I want to extrude and scale this little piece right here in. Because what we're going to eventually do once we fix the look of this is we're going to put a solidify on it. All right, so I got to fix the shape first because it's all screwed up. So let me grab, I'm trying to figure out right now where I need to grab faces from. Let me dissolve that edge. Let me start and grab these guys again, these faces. Let me hit Command plus once I grab all of this. Just give me a second here. So let me do Command plus, and just watch what I do here. I'm looking at where this is kind of off, and I'm like, okay, let me get this part more in line with the previous part. So see there, I'm just bringing everything up. I'm not trying to go super perfectly flat and flush with it, but I'm trying to just get it close. Now I can grab more faces by still hitting Command plus, and I can do the same thing. Let's bring all these up. All right. Now it's got a slightly raised look on it. So you'll see right here, the way I fix this is I start playing with Command plus and Command minus. Command minus reduces the selection. Command plus or Control plus increases the selection. Let me just bring it up, and I'm kind of looking at it from a slightly side angle, so I can see if that bowed raised shape of that lid looks right. I'm going back and forth between my screen and between like literally looking at the lid on the potpourri pot. And I mean, it's close. It ain't perfect, but you can see where it's not perfect. So let me back off a little bit and let me move this up or move it down. So, okay, so it's down on the shape here like that. That's pretty much it. So now let me grab this edge, and I'm going to do a mean crease, not a bevel, but here I want to do a bevel. Why? Well, I knew exactly the bevel I wanted. The mean crease here, I'm not sold on it yet. And notice I had to change my profile shape back to 0.5 because I wanted to taper or round off. I didn't want it just like a hard edge there. Same here, just adding a little bevels there. And let's go ahead and put a solidify on it. And if you notice, solidify is at the bottom. That's not correct. So let me move my solidify up above sub D in the stack, modifier stack, and then go in there and just like dial back the thickness so that the lid looks like it actually does. Like that. Now granted, we got sub D turned off. What I want to do here is I want to do a shade smooth, and I want to commit the solidify because I want this to be actual geometry. So let me grab that. I'm going to take the mean crease off, and then I'm going to commit to a bevel now. Now that I see how it looks. That's why I did the edge crease first, because it was non-destructive and I wasn't quite ready to commit to an edge there. Let me put one here with a profile of 0.5 on the bevel. So it's going to be a nice rounded tapered look. And then now let me put a hard edge. Let me apply this first. So now I can grab these edges here, whereas before I couldn't because it was just mimicking that geometry. Now it's the actual thing. So let me grab these edges, and I can put a tight little bevel on these guys and retain that shape. So when we turn sub D back on, it doesn't look muddy or like really overly rounded off on the edges. So now like re-enable sub D, and voila, look at that. Let me put a little bit of an edge here, because looking at the real thing, there's a little bit of an edge down here. But I mean, all in all, this is the lid I'm looking at, minus the like little cross at the top, where the little two pieces of plastic intersect. And I'm looking up there in the inside of that piece we extruded up, and we need a few loop cuts in there. I don't like those real long faces, so I try to fill them in with loop cuts so you don't have super long faces that are warping and bending all crazy and causing shading issues in your geometry. Let's put some on the outside as well. Let me tighten up this edge first. I want one at the top, and I want like 3 on the outside to match the 3 I put on the inside. You know what? I may not need 3 on the outside. I may be okay with 2. Let's just see. I'm all right with 1. Let's put 1 up here. Yeah, I'm good with it. And as you can see all the way down in there where the bowl is. So let's add another circle here, because I'm going to create the 2 little pieces of plastic that intersect into like the shape of a cross over the top. And I think that's there to just keep stuff from falling down in there as easy. But anyway, I know what it looks like. I'm just going to mimic it. Circle's way too big, so I can scale it down. Also want to rotate it on the Y-axis, and I think that's the direction I want to start my little shape from. So I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees on Y. Then I'm going to go to front ortho, go to X-ray, and then I want to look at this thing in context. I want to see it actually in place. Let's scale it down quite a bit more. Because what we're making here is basically we're going to make a big cylinder that goes from one edge of that opening to the other edge of the opening. So let's extrude it. About like that. Now I'm going back to top, only so I can see where that edge is. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Just get it close. All right, now I want to put a loop cut here, and I want to bevel that loop cut, and I only want 1 cut, because I'm going to take these 2 edges here when we go to individual centers, and I'm going to scale them up. And now you see I get that shape that I'm after. That's an easy way to make a pencil too, by the way. Now I'm going to put a bunch of loop cuts in here so we don't have long faces. And now that I've got one of these done, I'm going to Shift D or Alt D it. Either one, doesn't matter. And I'm going to rotate it on Z by 90. And I'm going to grab the previous one while still keeping that one selected. Hit Command J, Control J, and I'm going to merge them into one piece of geometry. Now I'm going to run a level 2 sub D, shade smooth. And I need to parent this to the lid. But let me give it a name in the outliner here, and then I'm going to do the parenting thing. And as you see, I'm just arbitrarily naming it stuff that just makes sense to me. You can name it whatever you like when you make it, as long as you understand the concept. That's kind of why I'm here doing these videos. I'm trying to teach you all concepts, so you kind of understand what's happening and why you're making these decisions that you're making when modeling. All right, that looks pretty good. Now on to the fun part. Let me just say, we don't need to do this for this particular model. However, I'm doing it anyway in the video just to show you, in case you want to texture this with an image texture. We're going to UV map it. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the shape. I'm isolating each piece. So I'm going to isolate the base plate, the bowl, the walls and the lid. And I'm marking seams. I'm trying to put the seams where you're not going to see them, like near the bottom or the back side of the thing or something like that. I mean, on the walls, it's kind of inevitable. You're going to have a cut somewhere where you're going to possibly see it. But I'm going to shoot it around to the back so you don't really notice it. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing with the lid. And really what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to add cuts in places where if I were to fillet this thing out flat, what looks the nicest? Because the nicer the UV cuts are, the easier it's going to be to put a texture on it that doesn't warp or look overly stretched or crazy. So you're going to see in this one I have multiple cuts. And I'm also going to show you, because we have so many little tight bevels in here, if you don't grab everything, it does affect your UV cuts. But I'm going to show you, if you see something that looks crazy, to just be aware, to be very specific and make sure you get all of the edges, even the ones that are inside the bevel, so that this thing cuts open right. And I'm just taking my time with this one. I could have just hit Alt and selected all of this and cut it, but I'm just kind of showing you guys the slow route, just to be more mindful of those little edges that are inside of those bevels. See, there's a good example right there. There's 3 edges, or excuse me, there's 2 edges inside of that are part of that bevel. So I'm gonna make sure I got that, and then I'm gonna just cut it on the outside and lay this whole part of this rim out flat. Yeah, see that those weren't selected. Mark seam. But like I said, normally I just hit the Alt key or hit the Control keys. I got a starting point, and then hit Control, hold down Control, and click on the end point, and it would have selected everything in between. Normally, me working at my normal speed, that's what I would have done, but I just wanted you guys to see this, only to make you aware of it. As you can see, I'm having some difficulty at times selecting stuff. Now, when you see that screen over there, it looks weird. That's because of my clip start setting. It's just a viewport. Yeah, can't talk. The viewpoint is not showing all of that just because of the clip start setting. So you can go in there in the end panel and change that. Actually, I think I showed how to do that in my last video, the one before this one. Yeah, see, same deal here. I'm just being too lazy to change it right now. All right. So right now, all I care about is putting the cuts in there. I don't care, because I'm kind of seeing it in my head. I kind of know what it's going to look like. So I want to move on to the next thing and cut that. I'm going to grab this bowl here. And what I want to do is isolate it by hitting the / button. It's like a toggle switch, turn it off, turn it on. And then I want to do it kind of like the same thing. Remember, this is double-sided now, because when we hit solidify, we added more geometry to it. So you're going to have to cut it on the inside and outside to get those cuts right. Because now you're having to fillet out the inside of the bowl if you want to texture it a certain way. Then you need to fillet the outside of the bowl if you want to texture it a certain way. So just keep that in mind. If this were flat with no depth, then you don't need to do this. So in other words, to be more specific in what I'm saying, is if I weren't showing the inside of the bowl, let's say if this whole thing was just one piece, you could never take the lid off, and I probably would never use solidify on it. I would have just left it like flat faces, and you just would have seen the shape. Then we could have just cut it once and we'd have been good to go. But since this has a lot more geometry and depth to it, I'm showing you that you gotta cut it on the inside too and the outside. You'll see what I'm talking about once we go into the UV tab and you can see the UVs actually laying out. Right now I'm just making selections where I want to do my cuts. And I will tell you, if this makes no sense to you, if you've never done this before, trust me, just do it a lot. Watch a lot of videos specifically on UV editing, and it will, over time, it will, I promise you it'll come to you on how to do this. when I first started using 3D software, I had no concept of, I understood why you did it, but I had no concept of how you do it. Like the whole concept just did not make sense to me at all. And that's because I didn't understand what was happening. So it's like everything else. You got to do it a lot, guys, and you'll get it. All right, just kind of looking everything over. I'm not going to worry about the feet because I'm not putting a texture on them. Like I said, the only purpose I'm adding this whole section to the video, which is making the video longer, is just to show you how to do this if you wanted to texture all of this. Let's say if you didn't want yours to be procedurally, I'm doing a procedural version. Just flat, just like basic colors. I'm not, only place where I'll put a texture is around the wall. But if you wanted to texture the whole thing to look like wood or whatever, like you'll need to, and you want to apply a texture map to it, you got to do this, or it's just going to look jacked up. You like that? The word jacked up. Anyway, let's go ahead and do a cut here. Let's do a cut. Cause see, I don't need to do a cut on that other side because it can wrap over right where it is here. And I'm gonna need to do a cut right in here as well so that this thing lays out kind of flat. And you'll see I'm gonna intentionally not do the best cuts. I'm gonna intentionally miss a couple of lines on purpose. So when you see the UVs laid out, you'll see that it ain't perfect, and you'll see how I come back. If you run into this, how I come back and what I pay attention to fix it. So I'm gonna bring that cut all the way into that grid. Well, grid fill, I should say. I'm just kind of looking it over. All right. This is a process that takes, in some cases, a little bit longer than others. So now I'm going to go to the UV tab in Blender. And as you can see, they're pretty decent cuts. Let's go ahead and create an image. I'm going to call it test. I'm going to set the width and height to 4096. And under generated type, I want a UV grid, and then I'm going to hit new image. So that brings in the UV grid. What this is going to do is it's going to allow me to see how good or bad my UV mapping work was. So what I want to do is I want to go and change my view mode to material view, or look dev mode, as I like to call it, or as it's called. And now I got it. In order to see that texture, I got to go and create a texture. I only got to do it once and then just apply the same one to everybody else. I'm going to call it, matte base. And then I'm going to use my node tools, node wrangler. I'm going to bring in that test image. I'm going to go to material preview. And now you see that the UV grid is being applied as if it were a wood texture or I don't know, whatever image text you had on here, sticker or whatever it is. It's being applied to those UV cuts so I can see how well the UV is or isn't. And this allows me to adjust it, right? See how those checkers are kind of coming inward at an angle at each other? That means I missed something on that cut. So this allows me to see it before I commit myself to applying my actual production texture to the model here. See up here at the top, it comes down to a V. That means I missed something in the cut. Just kind of looking it over. That's the purpose of this. Now, if you look in the UVs for that lid, see on the left-hand side, I missed something because it's not cut real clean. So now I gotta go back in here and figure out what I missed. And I'm gonna unwrap it again just to make sure that It is, in fact, I missed something. So now I'm gonna go back to edit mode, and I'm gonna come back in here. It's got to be up near where that smaller hole is, because if you look at the UV, you'll see that's where it's still stuck together. Stuck together means I didn't cut it. So that's a good way of looking at this. Now, if you see that orange overlay shows I'm in edit mode. If you look, I'm gonna go up here to the top here in a minute and just disable that so you can actually see what you're doing. Let me turn sub D off, just disable it. And I'm looking at those small little bevels there, see if I missed an edge or something, which I know I did. I just don't quite know where yet. So I just hit Alt, select the whole thing, mark seam, and bam, look at the difference. See, it opened up. So that looks right. So now I'm gonna turn that back on. I'm gonna go back to material preview. And it's kind of funky looking on the inside there. That's because we got some stretching, but I don't care because you're really not going to see too much of that. You might care for yours. I would say clean it up. I'd probably do another cut around that rim. So like the inside bottom of that rim where it tapers inward like that. And then maybe put another ring there and do that. This one came out very clean. I could get it even cleaner by straightening that long piece, but maybe I'll do a dedicated video on UV mapping one day. But the lid's good enough. The bowl looks pretty good. Same story with the bowl. See, it's not open all the way up. So let's go in here and do the same thing. I missed some edges somewhere because if you can see down there at the bottom center, that one didn't open all the way up. So what I want to do, just to make sure I get everything, is I want to select that. I'm gonna look on the back, just see if that's not where it is. I think it's on the inside, but let's just grab this one too. And what I can do is I can grab this edge way over here. I'm gonna mark these. Just kind of looking here. I can hit Alt and then unselect that one so I know I got everything in between. Hit. That's where it was on the inside. So see now how it split it nice and clean. Now I'm going to do unwrap, angle based, try it again. And now let's come back in here and look at it now. Yes, it's a lot cleaner now. So if you want to put a texture on here, that's UV. That's a generic demo of UV mapping and unwrapping to show you and getting your model ready for textures. This is not a deep dive or anything like that, but this is essentially how I do it. All right, I'm looking at the base. It looks pretty good. We don't need to do anything to that one. And like I said, the feet, I'm not worrying about the feet because none of this is going to have a texture but the walls. I just want to make sure that when I do texture it, it's UV mapped properly so the texture will fall on it properly. I won't have no craziness I got to deal with later. So let me turn the wall around, spin it around 180 degrees because the cut was like facing the camera. Now I'm gonna come back in here and see where it says 180. Let me hit Control A and then reset rotation. And you look in the end panel, it's reset to 0. So that'll be like its default state, in other words. All right, so now I don't need this grid texture anymore. So let's go in here. Let me go to shader tab or the shader editor. Move that guy out of the way. And what I can start doing is just hitting the X up there and removing this texture from all of those pieces. Because I literally just used it to test my UVs. That's it. Now for the real work. Remember, if I delete these off of the pieces of the model, that doesn't delete the UV work we did. It just removes that texture from those pieces. So all I want to do right now is I just want to add some color in here. This is like ceramic, has a gloss on it. So I'm gonna mimic that look by using the principal shader. I'm just arbitrarily picking some colors right now. I don't even know what I want this thing to look like. I hadn't designed it out or anything ahead of time. And some of this I'm sure will change as you'll see. Crank that roughness down so get it a little bit more reflective. And this is part kind of subjective. It's just all about looking back and forth at the real thing and then just trying to mimic those settings in the shader tab. I put a little bit of a coat on it, but the coat, I mean, it's like using sage in the kitchen, that spice. A little bit goes a long way. Or saffron, like it's super powerful. Think of that coat setting as the same thing. Like you don't really need to put a lot of value in that at all, and it makes a big difference. Alrighty, so now let's see what's next. I'm playing with the lid. I don't know what color I want the lid. Like I said, it'll likely change a lot in this video. I'm really focused now on that look of plastic because it's kind of a semi-glossy plastic up there. So that's all I'm really after, is mimicking that look. Go around here and play with some values, try some different things. And I know this part of the video may be boring to some of you, but I'm just showing you a lot of my process as I sit here and mess around with these colors for a while until I find something that I like. And typically what happens is I end up refining it later. But I'm not going to play with it as long as I normally do. Usually when I do this, I pre-plan and I have a color palette already laid out, and I plan this out as best I can. If this is like a client project, I'll go ahead and plan this out with colors and everything else. In the case of us doing a tutorial here, I'm just taking a shot at it, just showing you guys on how I build it, and I want to focus on that and showing you guys how to do the materials. So what you're seeing me doing right now is I'm just kind of playing with materials, trying to see if I want to go ahead and do the my plastic shader here. And I decided to go ahead and do it. And you can't see it because it's offline. But what I'm doing is I'm going back and forth of looking at the screen where I'm modeling and doing these shaders, and looking at the physical potpourri pot that's beside me. So there's going to be a little bit of pause in here, and that's what I'm doing because I'm recording this in real time as I'm making it. So you guys get the raw, live, truthful version of how this is. This ain't scripted, as they say. So I like to give you guys the real deal with my videos. That's why they're not as polished as some. Because I start building and I start hitting record. And I want you guys to see what it's actually like to do this, at least from my perspective. So what I'm doing now is I'm using my plastic shader node trick. I didn't invent it, but it works. And what I'm trying to do is get a particular primary diffuse color, and I want that white plastic sheen to be on it. And then I just play with the roughness in the glossy, and then I play with the factor of the mix shader to bias towards the diffuse color to get it's a little mix and match between all those settings to get plastic to look right. That looks good enough. And keep in mind, we're in look dev mode. We're in basically Eevee look dev right now. So we'll see what it really looks like when we get to cycles. And like I said, normally I cut this stuff out in my videos because it just makes the videos too long. And I start looking at metrics and people start dropping off because, you know, unfortunately people don't have the attention span that they used to. So a lot of people, I guess, look at the video to get what they need out of it and then move on, and that's fine. But for those of you who want to see the entire process of how this is done and hopefully gain more from it, you just stick through the videos. Some of it's kind of monotonous, I must say. But this is a day in the life of the way a lot of us do this. And I know I'm no different than other people. So anyway, the walls here, I want to have like a more of a metal aluminum type look. So I'm just coming up with shader in the principle to get something kind of close. And if you notice, I have not run a texture on anything yet, even though we did the UV mapping. That was really just to show you how to do it if you wanted to put a texture on it. But I will apply a texture to the wall of it. All right, so now we're going to do the lid. The lid is a glossy plastic. I'm using the same node setup, whereas I have a glossy node and I have a diffuse node. The diffuse node is going to be the primary color, and the glossy is going to give us the white sheen, if you will, on top. That looks at that plastically look when light hits it and bounces off of it a certain way. That gives it that plastic look. That's what glossy is giving us. And now I'm going to pipe both of those into a mix shader. And then what I do is the top node on the mix shader is node A. The bottom little green dot there is node B. Right now, the way I have it set up is I got diffuse on the bottom. So I'm going to bias the factor towards the right, and that's going to give me more diffuse color than gloss. That makes sense. And I'm just playing with it until I get something that looks like at least the shininess of the plasticky look of that lid that I'm actually looking at physically in front of me right now. There's no real set formula for this. You just got to look at your reference. My case is physical, but that gets it where you want it. Okay. And yet again, I'll just start screwing around with some colors. I don't know why I'm doing that, because I'm going to end up putting a texture on it. All right, let me go ahead, and I want the feet, and these are different techniques I'm showing you in this video. I want my feet down here to carry over the same material as the base. So I'm going to select the feet, then I'm going to select the base, then I'm going to hit Control L. And then I'm going to go link materials. Actually, let me try it the other way. Let me hit the feet first. Let me try it again. And then the base. Control L. Let's try it again. Link materials. There we go. Now it works. It just didn't, whatever reason. Maybe I didn't hit it good enough first time. And that keeps you from having to select every individual foot and then going up there in the shader editor and clicking the same material. We just link them, link those data blocks for materials. All right, let's drop in a quick plane. I'm just gonna make a quick and dirty little tabletop, nothing fancy. I'm just gonna kind of set up a scene for you guys. What I will probably end up omitting in this video is the camera, because you guys should know how to do that. If you don't, I have a ton of videos where I set up the cameras and the lights and all that good stuff. So I'm trying to omit it because this video's longer than the ones I like to make now. I usually like to keep my videos around 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the most. But I wanted to go slower in some areas on this one for some of the new viewers of the channel, just to kind of show you more of the process. But bringing in a plane, making a table out of it, I don't think I need to go into too much detail with that, but you're getting some of it. Okay, I just brought in a camera. I changed it to an orthographic camera just so you can, if you guys are wondering how I got that perspective. And we're going to texture the walls now. So I'm bringing in my trusty blender kit. I'm going to go down to materials, which are essentially textures. And I'm typing in floral as my search, because most of these things I see have some kind of cool floral pattern or something. And even though I love those colors, I don't really like that pattern. It's too busy. This looks pretty good, but it looks a little boring. So what I ended up doing is I found something in this blue. Now the green doesn't really match it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come back in here into my materials and my shader tab. I'm going to bring up my shader editor. And then I'm gonna come back in here and just kind of start color matching pieces of this and trying to find something that like kind of complements that pattern. I like that pattern, so I'm gonna do shades of blue. Maybe I'll play with the white somewhere. And like I say, this is where you have fun as a designer. You just start playing with different things and see what kind of works for you. I tried to tell you guys I was like, I'm always in here making refinements. I'm never happy with these color choices. I'm just trying different things that looks, and I'm trying to find something that gets me mentally and visually down a path. I'm like, okay, I'm on to something here. If I were to have done this ahead of time and created a color palette and stuff for this, it would have been a lot easier. But, you know, sometimes you get discovery in doing. So we're doing and we're discovering as we go. I kind of like that offset of that white, but it doesn't really match. There's not enough white on it for that whole giant lid to be white, I don't think. I think this blue might work. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing here because you see these crosses, they're not the same color as the lid. So I'm gonna do the same trick, and voila, they inherited the data, the color data, or the materials data, to be more specific. It's the materials data from the lid. So if that was a wood texture or something on that lid, or some kind of texture map or texture image, it would have inherited on those little cross part too. So now what I came in here and did is I just went ahead and did another plane. Made it a little bit shorter, made it a little bit thicker with extrude, subdividing it. I'm gonna apply a texture image to it that I brought in from Blender Kit. Let me stick it back on there again. There's that wood texture I want to use. And I've already UV unwrapped that table. So now, bam, this is what you get. We are done. Finally. This is a little bit longer one, but I hope you guys got some important things out of it. How to build it and how to do the materials. So if you like this content, please like, subscribe, and click that notification bell for more videos. I'll have another one coming up very soon. I've been off for a while, but I think I'm back. So I'll have some more content for you soon. Later.